In this particular video, I want to talk about what happened in this region just here. First time I created an invoice against this quote, it gave it invoice number 1001. The invoice happened to be the identical number as the quote. This second invoice I created jumped dramatically to a completely new number. That's because a couple of things are happening. If I exit out of here and I go into the business setup information, I'm going to have a look here. It says the invoices are to start from number 5,000. That's where that 5,000 just came from. Okay? The quotes are to start from 1,000. So why did the first invoice happen to be identical to the quote when we've told the system to start at 5,000? It doesn't make any sense. Easy as offers a facility for you to employ what it's called quote matching from this icon over here. What that means is this. You might be in a business, in an industry, or example, this particular client here invoices real estates. Now he might do 3 different jobs for the same real estate in the same day. So the real estate office might say, okay, I would prefer it if you invoice me the same invoice number as the quote, so when we obtain an invoice we can match it up against the quote and it's easier for us to find. And that might work out great in many different industries. So if you're only issuing one quote, one invoice, if you're in a particular business that, such as a builder might issue numerous invoices for one job, quote matching isn't going to work. So if you're invoicing one quote, one invoice, and you want them both to remain the same number, then you can turn it on. If quote matching is on, it's going to keep invoice numbers vacant that match a quote number. By default, quote matching is turned off. You actually have to turn it on. So if you want to turn it on, you simply just switch it on. Okay, and it knows from then on, Easy As knows from then on, that if you create a quote, it instantly sets aside that invoice number that matches that quote. So if you are going ahead and creating quotes down the road, it won't allow you to use that particular invoice number. This is why when we created a new quote, it said, well, previously, when we saw what happened with that previous screen, it didn't allow us to create another quote with the same number. So it then diverted to the standard system of providing the next quote, the next invoice number in line. And that's why it gave us invoice number 5,000 and something. That is the quote matching system. I think there's another video that talks about that specifically at any rate. But look, it's not much more than what I've just mentioned. So if I briefly look at that again now, if I click create a quote, I'm going to create a new quote here. I'm going to prove to you that is actually working. And I'm just going to put anything on here. I'm just going to select some gibberish. Really don't care. Let's put this here. Let's just put in some crap in here. We've got 3 lots of crap. $100 worth of crap. Okay, so that's that particular. I'm going to put it across Smith Street so you can see that as well coming up. I'm going to give it some sales tax. Okay, done. Now, I'm exiting that. So we'll see here the quote number is 1002. It knows that even though we have started our invoices from 5,000, it knows that when it creates this invoice, it's got to match it to this. So regardless of what we've told the system to start our invoices from, it still has to match the quote number because we've told it to do that as a primary setting. So now, if I create this invoice for this, it's going to come up as 1002. And there we are. We've now got an invoice and quote that matches. So what you can do on the invoice and quote screens is this. You can jump backwards and forwards. Say I wanted to look at this particular invoice without jumping out of the quote screen and going back to the main menu and going back to the invoice. If I click on this number now, I double click that, it's going to bring up the invoice screen and it's going to filter that for me. I don't have to see all the other invoices on the screen. It brings that one up. I can jump in that and have a look at that invoice. I can now exit out of that, exit out of this and go back to the quote screen, so it returns me back to where I was. And the same happens in reverse. If I happen to be on the invoice screen, I can double click on a quote number, for example, this quote here, and it will open up the quote screen and present me with this here. So what that means is that when you create a new invoice or a quote, you don't have to jump backwards and forwards to edit and look for stuff. You can do it all from one screen. So if, for example, I'm on a quote screen and I create an invoice. Let's just create a new invoice for this guy here against this one here. Again, just to show you. So I've created an invoice. It's just told us that invoice and quoting isn't going to match because there's already one in the system. That's okay. We already knew that was going to occur. So it's just giving you a default invoice number. So now I want to look at that invoice. I can just go straight to it without having to close this. So I can just jump in here, and now it has filtered that screen. It's brought up to say that there's editing required. We already know that. Now the numbers are there. When we click this, it's all entered, and it's perfect. Now I can print that out if that's what I want to do. So without having to locate that invoice on the invoice screen, without having to close down the quote screen, find the invoice, edit it, etc., I can do all that with a couple of clicks.